Hi, everyone. This is Chris Grosso with the Indie Spiritualist podcast on Ram Dass's Be Here Now Network. And my guest today, joining me again on the show, Raghunath Ray Cappo. Ray, thank you so much for taking the time to be back.
Great to be back here. Thank you. Great to see you.
You too. Thanks. So I'm going to read Ray's bio quickly, and we're going to get into this absolutely incredible book that came out from Punk to Monk, a memoir. Excited to dive into that with you. But for those few listeners that might not be familiar with my friend here, as a teen in the 80s, Ray Cappo founded the hardcore punk band Youth of Today, which championed the principles of clean living, vegetarianism, and self-control. After experiencing a spiritual awakening in India, he formed a new band, Shelter, devoted to spreading a message of hope through spiritual connection. Ray currently leads yoga retreats, trainings, and kirtans at his Supersoul Farm retreat center in Upstate New York, as well as annual pilgrimages to India. He is the co-founder and co-host of Wisdom of the Sages, a daily yoga podcast that has been ranked #1 on Apple for podcasts about spirituality. And you can visit more and learn more by visiting www.raghunath.yoga. If you are on the Be Here Now network, just scroll down. It will be linked there for you. And Ray, thanks again for being here.
Alrighty. Great. Great to see you.
Yeah, really good to see you. So this wonderful, wonderful book from Punk to Monk. Yeah, I loved it right from the beginning pages. I forgot that you grew up in Connecticut, and while we're slightly different in age, not by much, I was so just fascinated by how our upbringings are very, very similar. Growing up in Connecticut.
What part of Connecticut did you grow up in?
So I started in Milford, but by the time I found punk and hardcore in like 93, I was living in East Haddam, very rural town, kind of between Middletown and Old Saybrook up Route 9.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. For me, I remember, though, I was into alternative music, grunge, etc. And then an older friend, turned me on to, I think the first hardcore record I ever heard was Snapcase, Looking Glass Self. And it was a special moment for me. And then later learned about Youth of Today and Shelter, and seen both several times. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah. It's always fun to talk to somebody about both hardcore punk and spirituality, which this book
it's an interesting blend.
Covers. Yeah.
It's an interesting blend, and that marriage is real. It's like I know so many serious yoga students, practitioners, yoga teachers who came from the punk and hardcore scene.
Right.
And I think that music was an alternative for a lot of people away from mainstream culture. For me, I can say that yoga in the 80s, when I got into it, was like weird, on the fringe, for freaks, as well as vegetarianism, veganism, any type of obscure diet that wasn't your standard American cottage cheese and iceberg lettuce diet. That was considered like a health food diet: cottage cheese, canned peaches.
Yeah.
And so, my holy place when I was a teenager was the Lower East Side of New York City. So as a Connecticut boy growing up in corporate rock and corporate arena rock, to go to the Lower East Side of New York, that's where you found books on metaphysics and spirituality, alternative lifestyles, alternative music, alternative ways to dress and look, and alternative haircuts. And so I migrated immediately to Weiser's bookstore on, I think it was 24th Street. It was like an old, I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's like an old bookstore on metaphysical spirituality, Christ consciousness, Tibetan Book of the Dead, Bhagavad Gita, Christ consciousness. It was just like one of these like witchcraft, one of these like far out bookstores. I just go there and just go through these books.
Yeah.
And I was fascinated by all of it. And that somehow blended into my lifestyle. Got into vegetarianism back then, when it was a freak show back then to be into stuff like that. Now there's yoga everywhere. You can go to yoga every block. There's Whole Foods everywhere. So it's, but that being said, so I see a lot of people grown out of this alternative scene into a spiritual culture.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful marriage. I just did a whole tour through Europe promoting the book, doing reunion shows. and teaching yoga festivals and at yoga classes. And I just see like people coming to yoga classes covered in tattoos. And, it's like, oh yeah, I listened to your band, 20 years ago, and now I'm a yoga teacher and I lead retreats in Berlin or things like that. Very, very interesting.
Yeah, I have a friend. I don't know if you've ever crossed paths with him, but his name's Miguel Chen. He's a bass player for Teenage Bottle Rocket, and they're on Fat Records. And he, back when Warped Tour was a thing, he would always be teaching free yoga classes to people. Yeah, he's written some really cool books. But it is, to me, a natural next step. A friend back in the early 90s, told me that punk hardcore for him was the search for something more in a world increasingly devoid of things with substance. And that's what drew me to it, and then learning about specifically for me, Eastern philosophies like the Gita or the Dhammapada, and then later on, a lot of great Gnostic Christian writings and Zen and different traditions. But it just, it was... Yeah.
It must have resonated with you when you're reading my early days and getting into all this stuff.
Finding the bookstores, like you just mentioned. Yeah, you talk about that. And then, so jumping a little ahead here, but, and not to be controversial right off the bat, but you talk about Harley, an iconic hardcore figure from the Cro-Mags, and what a deep impact he had on you. And I think that's awesome. And I've had John on my podcast before, never Harley, but Cro-Mags are iconic. And I think it's cool how much, he had impacted you. And I have not seen the new documentary yet, but I know that just recently came out, which I'm psyched to check out.
It's very interesting documentary, Wired for Chaos.
Yeah.
The guy had a very unique life.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so something I did want to ask you, again, this was going to be later on, but since I guess it's coming up, is, for you, how do you, there's no secret. Anybody that knows Cro-Mags, there's a lot of violence around that. And you kind of touched on it a little bit, but how do you find that reconciliation, between the teachings and certain actions, if you do at all?
I didn't find a reconciliation back then, because here is a guy who was like a human pit bull.
Right.
A vicious human pit bull.
Yeah.
But the only way I could reconcile was that somehow this guy who's like a street kid, leader of a gang, incredibly violent, for most people, he was like like almost like a comic book villain, creating. And I grew up in Connecticut. I grew up with a loving family, a loving home. He grew up on the streets with his mother, who was a beatnik or like a hippie, and living in a squat in Denmark, and then learning instruments. The guy's life is just like fascinating. Living in squats at his childhood. Well, most people were Cub Scouts.
Yeah,
it was like in a punk band in 1978. So our lives were very much different, but it also shows how like the hand of God can touch anybody, and somehow it touched him, and it touched his heart in a deep way.
Yes.
At the time, I think because his life maybe was very traumatic. Have you watched the documentary, which he's just sent me an advanced copy? Nice. You sort of get a bigger picture of, a backstory of where he was at, and you get to understand him a little bit more. But for me, as a kid who's sort of like, you're still trying to find your identity, and part of my identity was I'm a punk, I'm a badass, even though I came from a supporting, loving family, I wanted to be a nonconformist. I wanted to find myself. Who am I? Everyone's just wearing costumes. I want to find my own, what's my real costume? And so when you hear somebody talking about, the soul is eternal, and there's one God, and all these religions are meant to come together as one, and and that we should be kind to animals, and we should see spirit in every living being. That stuff was like sort of like mind blowing. But, I was still at an age and a time in history where, India was a weird place. There was hardly any Indians I ever met in America back then. And yoga was, there was like in 1985, 86, there was no yoga studios in New York except one set up by ashrams, by Indian gurus. Yeah. So it was also very, very far before the internet. Everything was foreign. and really peculiar. If you wanted to know about yoga, you better dig up a World Book Encyclopedia and dig around. But like in Connecticut, you're not going to find much. There was nothing, it was weird and random and peculiar. So my point is that I think if this spiritual information came in the form of a swami with a beard and saffron robes, and I was like this 17-year-old punk kid, I would have just like walked away from it. But because it came from a guy I respected who had credibility and was tough and played the bass and was a leader of a gang, and I was sort of like still trying to find myself. Am I like divine or demonic myself? What am I?
Right.
It sort of appealed to me, and I could hear from him.
Yeah.
And he had just been fed by the Hare Krishnas on the street, free food. Yeah. And to him, he just started inquiring about the Bhagavad Gita. Well, tell me what your theories of life are. And the Bhagavad Gita is so deep and so vast and so ecumenical and broad-minded that it penetrated his heart.
Yeah.
And so that was sort of like the beginning of my spiritual path.
Yeah.
And to understand the very wide gate that Eastern thought has. And it changed my life to this day.
Sure. And thank you for that. And I ask because for me, I remember I wrote an article for, I think it was Mantra Yoga and Health magazine some years ago, talking about, my path personally wasn't peaceful and quiet and calm getting there. It was violent, not as violent as, Harley's by any stretch of the imagination, more of an inward violence, but there was also external violence as well.
Sure.
But I look back and I trace like how I got there, and I did not, descend onto the path in the Himalayas. It was like staggering and stumbling, and I found it through like detoxes and some dark places. So I appreciate you sharing that. And, I sometimes I've joked a little bit about, I've hosted this podcast, on Ram Dass's network since its inception, 10 years now. And
wow.
Yeah. And I still have a picture of the original 9. I was one of them. And it's like Ram Dass and Krishna Das and Sharon Salisbury, like heavy hitters. And then me, like, and I'm like, I wonder if I was just like the token tattooed guy, but whatever, like this podcast and the books and the work you do, shelter, whatever it is, we get that message out to people who otherwise may not have heard it. And so,
sure.
and if that's Harley, whatever it is, like, awesome, whatever, so.
It's also really nice as you're sharing, like, Harley came through getting fed on the streets. I came through hearing from Harley. You came from, self-violence.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how spirit descends on all living beings. And sometimes it's through this very beautiful passed down from my grandfather to my father to me. Yeah. But not all of us fell from the heavens, especially growing up in a Western world. Right. And sometimes there's a beauty of hitting a rock bottom or hitting a rock bottom 2 or 3 times.
Sure.
Only to realize that is God's play for our growth and evolution and our blossoming to be the best. And maybe nothing else would do. Maybe those are the key ingredients that make you become the best you. I'd like to think that I don't have to be strung out on heroin or get my face ground into the dirt or do something or be arrested, but maybe it is. You know what I mean? And whatever brings you to that place. And I've looked back at my life, and as you can see in the book, or partially in the book, because it's not my whole life, but you can see it's not like a super straight line. It's not like if you read autobiography of a yogi or Radhanath Swami's A Journey Home, where it's almost like they're on a speedboat to God.
Right.
I definitely struggle with my mind, with doubts, with self-doubt, with belief and faith, and then questioning myself again, and then getting sick, and the whole plethora of like a human reaction to being in a foreign country that didn't understand Westerners trying to get into, the spiritual path. But it's everything. And in writing the book, I really saw the hand of God, meaning I saw that every struggle I've ever had in my life was to bring me higher. And that people have, the more you write about your past, the more you realize like the universe has sent me people again and again, has sent me messengers. And there are certain times I was really ripe to hear about it. And there were certain lessons I didn't learn that came back again and woke me up again. And then I had to eat dirt again. And it's so beautiful to witness life stepping back. And you realize that there is benevolence behind it. Sometimes the mom yells at the child or the father says, get in the car right now. Yeah. And the child cries. And then dad said, we're going to go to the beach. And now what are we doing? We're at the bank, and then I cry again. And then dad says, we're going to go to the beach. And now we're at the food store. And, I not understanding that dad's got a big plan for this. Dad's plan was, you got to take some money from the bank. You got to get some snacks for the beach. You got to pull over and get some gas. There's a greater plan that me and my childlike intelligence cannot see.
Yeah.
And so I'm just stuck in this, oh, why me? Oh, that's not fair. Oh, I'm in Maya. But actually, that's part of Krishna or God's beautiful unfolding of the flowering of the blossom. Yeah. To make that scent happen and the beauty of the flower, you got to be buried in the soil and
no mud, no lotus. Like
no mud, no lotus. My friend. Yeah.
So while you're talking about that, I'm thinking about some of the early chapters where you're talking about you and Purcell, and you guys are just going on tour, and it's going to work out. Universe has our back, and you have these wild adventures with the van you talk about, and you end up making it to the show, and things just keep lining up because you had that faith, and you just went for it. Does that? Based on what you're saying and what you talk about in the book, I feel that still resonates for you. But I guess where I'm going with that is I've been, we have AI now and a lot of things are coming to light. And I don't know how much I necessarily trust all that because it's still created through the human, we made it. So there's probably some of that imbued. But like aside from that, I've been really loving Neil deGrasse Tyson lately. And I went and saw him talk up at the Bush Show not that long ago. And he puts out, maybe we're in a simulation. Who knows? So I know it's a lot of mental gymnastics thinking about that stuff. But, with you today, you still like in your heart, you feel like there's this divine purpose there. This is how it is. It's, or do you think there is room for maybe it is something different?
Well, what we were talking about in our teenage life was an inherent type of pronoia where we trust that if we're doing good in this world, it's just gonna work out. And that was our faith. And it did. It magically did. It gave us some type of, it was our initial ideas of faith and spirit. And according to the Vedas, this is a simulation of sorts. Everything, it appears real, it appears solid, but we see in our own lifetime. I just did a 30-year reunion tour of a record that was very popular for our band, Shelter. Mm-hmm. And it's a simulation. It's as if, I'd go to, the Cologne and Berlin and Budapest and, London, and people were like, yeah, 30 years ago, I went to your show here. Here's a picture of us. Mm-hmm. Can I take another picture, 30 years later? And, your music meant everything to us. And I'm looking at the picture of him 30 years ago. He's like a little boy. I'm like a little boy. And now it's 30 years later. And here's my 25-year-old son. So it's like, oh, I get it. These things are not frozen in time. We're not static. We're ever-changing, influx, embodied spirits.
Yes.
So this is sort of a virtual reality we're living in where it appears one way. It appears like we're frozen in time. I'm not. I'm a 59-year-old man. I went to India when I was 22 years old. Mm-hmm. My body's changing. My environment's changing. India's changing.
Sure.
So then what is solid? Even this desk I'm sitting at is not solid.
Right.
You can have subatomic particles shooting through this desk because it appears solid to my naked eye. Mm-hmm. So then what the yogi sees is that the subtle is the solid, and the gross, the things that we think are solid, the foundation, our home. No, our home's not solid. We leave our homes. We get kicked out of our homes. A hurricane comes and destroys our home. My kids grow up. Sometimes your kids don't grow up and they don't like you anymore. So, you get some money, you lose some money. Someone you love that seems like they're a pillar in your life, die. So the things that we think are solid are not. They're gone.
Absolutely.
And it's the subtle things. And that's what spiritual paths all over the world have been talking about. We have to figure out how to tune in with the subtle. The temporary doesn't give us happiness. The temporary goggles that we wear, like, we'll go here, we'll do this adventure, we'll do this. It gives you a woo. That's about it. It gives you a woo of joy. But it's a blink where if we want that lasting happiness, every spiritual path, any 12-step growth, any religion from around the world will say, you got to go to something more subtle. And there's meditational practices to how to get there. And it's got to be underneath the senses, underneath the mind. And then you'll start to be connected. And at those tragic times when the seasons do change, can you be in clear consciousness? Again, this is what the yogis call samadhi, where we get the English word sameness from. Can we be the same? Can we not just be on a mental roller coaster, an emotional roller coaster taking me through the ups and downs of our life?
Yeah. I appreciate you. I appreciate you sharing that. We definitely have a lot of crossover in what you just said. I have a very lay appreciation or knowledge of like quantum physics, but what they are saying compared to what a lot of the ancient yogis and rishis of India from thousands of years ago seems rather striking to me at times. Different languages, but talking about energy, and it's all, again, Thich Nhat Hanh, thanks to impermanence, everything is possible. It's just always in constant flux and change. So appreciate you sharing that. And you'd mentioned, you're just touring with Shelter on that reunion, the album tour. And so I mentioned Snapcase earlier and Looking Glass Self. And I remember that record so vividly because I remember sitting in my friend's bedroom, sitting at his desk, he played it, and it cut like right through the core of me. And I didn't experience music like that again until maybe 15 years later, the first time I took out a Krishna Das CD from my local library. I didn't know anything about Bhakti or Kirtan. I was newly into Ram Dass, but I put that album on, and I remember two different genres, but it had the same exact influence, like same experience.
Many people say that.
Oh, it was wild.
So many people say that.
Here you are doing, Shelter, and of course Youth of Today too, on stage, energetically, in that microphone, people screaming along, jumping around. It's a wild time, beautiful time. And then you're also performing bhakti and chanting and playing the harmonium. What's the experience? What is that like for you? Do you find similarities? Are they different? What's going on for you in both of those?
Good question, because it seems like one, you're just sort of going off and losing it and screaming. And the other one is sort of like meditational. As soon as I made the click at the end of Youth of Today that we're not here to be God, we're here to serve God.
Yeah.
That changed everything. That phrase changed everything. It changed everything, not because you can lead a very meditational kirtan, but it can be all about you. Hey, look at me playing this cool Eastern instrument or leading sacred mantras. I've met so many kirtan, quote, performers who are just performing. Yeah. And it's about them being the center. And that's not what kirtan is. Kirtan is group prayer. I'm trying to lead people to the center. And we're trying to sort of keep our ego out of the way and in check. And when you can do that in a hardcore band too, not just in a hardcore band, if you could do that as a parent, as a lover, as a friend, in life, can your mood to be serving the center instead of being the center? And it changes everything, and changes kirtan for sure.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not even technical skill. I've seen some of the best kirtan people who are not technically that skilled, but you can see they're doing it with the appropriate intention, and it affects me in a much deeper way by hearing those mantras. Yeah. So I think that's a big part of learning not just how to chant mantras, but learning how to live. It's like sort of the art of living, which is, can I be part serving something bigger than myself instead of being the center, which, I've never met bigger egos than within the yoga scene.
Oh yeah,
you know what I mean? It's just like you think, well, no, these guys they're doing yoga. They're not working on Wall Street. Who cares?
Yes.
If a guy's working on Wall Street, taking his money and using it for great things to serve other people, that's yoga. Sure. But if you got some yoga teacher who can do, is like high numbers on Instagram, lots of validation, and he knows it or she knows it, then you can just be, if it's all about you, well, that's a problem. I mean, as far as yoga goes.
Yes.
Once you start taking pictures of yourself in meditation, it's not yoga anymore. You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. Absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. I remember I've only been to a kirtan you did once, and it was when we were both presenting down at Wanderlust in West Virginia, I think, of all places.
That's right.
Yeah, we were both down there, and I remember how much fun it was. You were very funny. I remember laughing a lot in between the songs, and very energetic. And
we did a kirtan down there, right?
Yeah. You presented too, but you did a kirtan, and it was a blast. And I see videos that people post to attend them, and it's very energetic and lively. And I do, at least from my perspective, see like a bit of that same energy. Yes, you're sitting, and you're playing, but it's like you're in it, and I really appreciate that about how you perform. So, we mentioned before we got on this, or I asked you before we got on this about Youth of Today is playing some shows coming up as well. And, you write about Youth of Today and one of the most iconic, punk hardcore bands all time. And have those lyrics in any way taken on a bit of a different meaning for you now where you are in your path? Or is it just you're singing them and you're still, enjoying that part of your life?
Truthfully, even as soon as I got into Youth of Today, I was already on a sort of a spiritual trajectory. So most of them I could sort of rally behind even today. Yeah. Most of them, not all of them, probably. I was like 19, but for the most part, when I sing these songs, they are sort of like a child's, walking through a threshold. So straight edge, like a threshold, meaning you got to keep your body clean. Your body's your gift, you don't, it's your temple, don't piss in the temple, so to speak. So, clean living was part of our message in a scene in the 80s where everybody's intoxicated. Everyone was huffing glue. Yeah. Everybody was, smoking angel dust. And so for us, it was like, no, this is our temple. We're going to take care of our temple. But I always felt like, okay, clean living, that can't be the end game because, birds are clean living, chickens are clean. You know what I mean? There's a lot of animals that are clean living. It's like, we got to go higher than that. And and unfortunately, I just had access to all these metaphysical books and yoga and spirituality. And to me, it was like, the real work here is the ego. The real work here is the mind. Yeah. And that was a gift to have access to all these type of information when I was a young man, because, or else it would have just stopped at straight edge. And a lot of people did stop at straight edge, and good for them. But let's face it, you could be straight edge, meaning you don't drink, you don't smoke, you're vegetarian, but you could be arrogant, you could be a narcissist, you could be cruel, you could be cruel, you could be rude, you could be, nasty. So that wasn't the end game for me. My idea was like, these are a threshold to some other world. And so, very rapidly, I saw the scene come into, like, so many people became straight edge, became vegetarian or vegan, but I felt like they just put the brakes on it there and they left like, now we are at this high level, and they used it as another tool for ego. And you always have to be careful of that, whether you're advanced in yoga asanas, whether you're fighting for some political cause, whether you're doing it for some dietary cause, you're trying to save the planet. You got to be careful you don't overstep these boundaries where it's just making you hate others that are not like you. Yeah. And that became a very, very real thing in that music scene. And I had to sort of like move past it and let it go and sort of start to find myself as a separate entity. And that's when I just packed it in and went to India.
Yeah. So, and a lot of that resonates for me. Checks out,
Well, I think these spiritual books with people on their journey, And I'm sure, even though we were from the punk scene and we both have tattoos, I'm sure we're different in a lot of ways. And I'm sure Paramahamsa Yogananda was different than us, and Radhanath Swami is different than us. But everybody, whether it's Paramahamsa Yogananda or you or me, we all experience the same life of love and anger and hurt and betrayal and joy and gain and loss. And a lot of the same themes of the drama come in again and again. And it's not just in our age. It's been happening for thousands of years and hundreds of years. And so in one sense, we're different, but your spiritual path and the pitfalls you went through, and you're climbing out of the pits, I'll be able to relate to that when your autobiography comes out. And it'll help me and I'll see myself on your journey in the same way I saw myself in Paramahamsa Yogananda's journey. Sure. Maybe I'm not walking the exact same shoes or sandals he was, but it's definitively, oh yeah, I can see. I understand. Like, and these stories inspire us too. Yeah. To zip our own life and see that there is something more subtle, something more refined, something more sublime.
Yeah. Yeah. Even with Ram Dass, for me, very different lives. Of course, a Harvard professor and, just some kid, over here that's interested in something deeper. But that in and of itself, that was enough. And to me, like, Ram Dass was a OG punk rocker in his own right. He was just doing his thing and, like, following his path. And he was Buddhist before he met Maharaji, and then he met Maharaji, and everything broke open for him. But yeah, there didn't have to be similar lives, but similar, I think, like heart yearnings and soul yearnings. And and that resonated at a level that meant a lot to me. And I felt like a kinship, if nothing else, through that.
Exactly. And I think everyone's got a similar heart.
Yeah.
That's how we're the same. We all yearn to be loved, and we all don't want temporary love.
Yes.
And some of us think, well, no, I knew temporary love, but it's not your girlfriend or boyfriend or your dog or your spouse or your soulmate or that dream house or forever house or your forever motorcycle. It is a God that fits in that God-shaped hole. Nothing else will fit in that God-shaped hole. And if you make your spouse your God, or your dog your God, or your house your God, that God is always going to let you down.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember you talking about in the book a point where you were working at I think it was a bar, and you were dating for all intents and purposes, like a beautiful female, and it's like things should be great, but you realized at that point that kind of what you just said, this is not what, like, my heart is, or I'm paraphrasing here, but there's something in me that is looking for something more than this. Would you say that was perhaps like the first time you started connecting with that going deeper, the sense of this stuff that is temporary, while it can be beautiful and wonderful, is not like what is going to sustain me. It's not going to fill that God-shaped hole.
Those questions started, I think it was an interesting marriage between reading, so that cultivating of knowledge, applying that knowledge in your life, and then getting some thirst and some taste for that the result of the application of the knowledge, and then looking at the things that I was enjoying, I was valuing, I was putting high, and realizing this is like a piece of Trident gum. And after like 40 chews, where's the taste anymore? Big deal. I get an initial squirt gum. Remember squirt gum?
Oh, sure I do.
Oh, that's delicious. And then it's over.
Yeah, 5
like,
seconds
is this
of
what I
greatness.
want? Is like, I want another piece of squirt gum, another piece of squirt gum, another piece of squirt gum. How about find something that just lasts a little longer instead of just quick thrills? And so, it's teenage talk, and someone could say, well, you got to find someone you love. And you get that too. I'm not putting that down, that find a good partner. I'm just saying that, to me, to my understanding of the Vedic path, is that it's not you make another person or thing, person, place, or thing your God. But real soulmate means you walk hand in hand towards light and truth and love and connection.
Yeah.
So there was no. I remember that part in the book where I'm just laying next to this.
Yeah.
young, beautiful girl. And I was a young, not as beautiful guy, but I was just thinking, now what? And what am I supposed to get from this? Like, what do I want? And it was right after we went to this meeting, the Buddhist meditation meeting. And it sort of gave me some sort of like deeper thoughts. And I think that is important to cultivate that transcendental knowledge through books, through nowadays, through whatever YouTube videos or audiobooks and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But we keep that knowledge close, and then we try to apply that knowledge, and it starts to crack open a new part of your intelligence instead of just our beast intelligence, which wants to eat and sleep and mate and defend.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know? Absolutely.
And I know, you talk about in the book, and a lot of people that have followed you and Shelter know, like, you guys started Youth of Today, of course, iconic, big, but then Shelter, growing on tour with No Doubt at one point, right? Or playing a show. It's like, so, can you talk a little bit? Because we've talked about people that, you can have ego creep in when you're quote unquote spiritual. How was that experience for you? As you're going deeper into your path, yet you're in this band that's getting bigger, and more people are coming, and you're again playing with No Doubt, Gwen Stefani. Like, what was that experience like for you?
It's the same principle, because it's not like money, popularity, fame. It's not like those are Maya. It's not like they're evil.
Yeah.
Everything is it's all about utility. Suppose you make a lot of money. Can you have a lot of money and be spiritual? Sure you can.
Sure.
You can also do some horrible things with money. You can do some wonderful things with money. You can do some horrible things with money. You can do wonderful things with fame. You could do some horrible things with fame, right? You could do wonderful things with beauty, and you could do horrible things with beauty. You can use all these things to manipulate the world, to endorse the illusion that you're God and that you're the controller and you're the badass. Or you can use every gift you have as an offering. And that can be fame, and that can be popularity. So it was nice to witness it whereas like in Youth of Today, I just like no clue what was going on. Are we big? Then we get competitive. And then, the other band comes out of nowhere and they're bigger than us. And then we, and they fight over money or something.
Sure.
Whereas this time I got to see it with like sort of like the eyes of knowledge. Like, okay, this is what God or the universe or Krishna wants from us right now. He wants us to play on this massive stage. And he wants to do it with integrity and humility. He wants us to do it as a service and serve the center instead of being the center. And I will say, if you go on stage with that frame of reference, when you get off stage, you're completely peaceful. If you get on stage where so many people are throwing accolades at you and love at you, and you're the best, and you take that on, you're like, yeah, I am the best, and I'm reciprocating with them, and I'm in my flow, so to speak, and I'm feeling high. Then when you get off, if you own that respect as yours and don't offer it back to God, when you get off stage, you go down hard. It's like going on a high drug and coming down. And now for me, it was so easy to understand why people in bands or celebrities, they become drug addicts. Sure. They become sex addicts. They become alcoholics. Because once you get out of the public eye and you're nobody again, when you're not getting 24/7 accolades, it's hard to come down. Because in a few moments, you were like the center of the world. You had thousands of people singing your songs like they knew all these, words that that you were writing in your bedroom, Yeah. And now it's like, now you're nobody at a coffee shop and no one even recognizes you. I can understand that emotional roller coaster of dealing with so-called good karma. I say so-called because to be successful, to be beautiful, to be famous, those are all types of good karma, but good karma can ruin your life. And in Bhakti, we're not interested in good karma. We're interested in being a servant of the center, not being the center. And that's a safe place for the heart to be. I want to serve the center. I don't want to be the center because it's not real. I'm not the center of the universe. Yeah. I'm a satellite of something bigger. And my joy comes from giving up, from rendering service.
Yeah.
Right?
You know,
Like
go ahead, Gabe.
yeah, it's just like a parent. Like I've raised 5 kids.
Yeah.
And it's like the parent sucks it up for the kid.
Yeah.
They're driving to soccer, driving back from soccer. The parents are cooking dinner. They're just trying to go grocery shopping. The kid's just got to show up and eat. But after the parent cooks the meal and puts in so much effort and so much love goes into that meal, once the child says, "Oh, thank you so much," the parent feels so satisfied. The parent doesn't even have to eat practically. So we can see the macro in the micro, and the micro in this example is like the parent just offering love to the child, not really expecting, or the mother sacrificing so much for the child, and the child doesn't even get it, doesn't even understand so in the same way, we have that same loving reciprocation, and we get so much joy out of it.
Yeah.
How much joy do you get? I mean, imagine being a super celebrity. It must be exhausting.
Sure.
Even the little bit of fame I get when I'm just like walking from the van or the bus to the club backstage, and you get a bunch of people. Hey, let me take a photo with you. Hey, look, can you sign my CD? It's just like after a while, can I just go and sit alone? I don't want to be treated like a cardboard cutout. Here's a cardboard cutout picture of me. Take a photo with this thing. You know, I can't imagine what it must be like to be Madonna, or to be some, or the Beatles, or it must be exhausting.
Yeah. Yeah. I wouldn't know anything about it, but yes, I can only imagine.
Right. It's like good karma can ruin your life. And the biggest way it could ruin your life is you start to believe the hype. Yeah, I guess I am the center of the universe.
Yeah.
I guess I am. But then you set yourself up, because deep down we know we're alone. Yeah. It's just us and God. And that people may not even like us. They just like what we have. And they just want to be parasitical almost, and take something from you. And they like you because your money, or for your fame, or your beauty, or your Shakti, or whatever you have. Yeah. But do they even know who you are? So these are like great questions for like the aspiring spiritualist to like contemplate deeply.
Yeah.
And to apply and to meditate on, like, why there are shortcomings in good karma, and sometimes how there's blessings in lousy karma. Yeah. Sometimes the worst karmic phases of my life have been the biggest blessings. Sometimes it's safe to say we can all relate to that. When we lost everything, or when we got fired, or we were asked to leave, or we got expelled, or we hit rock bottom and we're on our knees crying in a gutter, or we got our heart broken. And sometimes we reflect and like, that was the best thing that could have happened to me. Thank God I got laid off. Thank God he broke my heart. Thank God, Yeah.
I do know. It was almost 2 years ago. I was waking up in an emergency room in San Diego, not remembering how I got there, literally naked under a blanket, after a horrible relapse to alcohol. And
Hare Krishna.
Yeah, seriously, what a blessing. I would have never guessed 2 years ago I would be where I am today. Like, beautiful. Best place I've ever been in my life. And yeah, sucks I had to go to that place, but so it is, and here I am. So yeah,
sometimes
I know what you're saying.
Sometimes cooking some khichdi and it needs a chili. You just take the chili straight up, it might be impalatable. Yeah. But in the bigger picture of your life, you need that chili to spice it up. Yeah. For maybe this is what you need. Say never again. Yeah. Never again, God. Yeah.
For real. Something I wanted to say before I do want to talk a little more about India, and I know we're starting to get a little close on time too. I remember when I saw you at that kirtan down in West Virginia, and this is not to blow smoke, but just to speak to the authenticity with which I really do believe you speak. I don't remember the exact context, but or a few times people were, saying thank you to you when you're having a little bit of a conversation, and you wouldn't take any credit. It was always to your teachers, or whomever, but you never took credit. And I remember that stuck out to me. I was like, huh, okay. I really appreciated that.
Offering pranams or appreciation to your teachers is a way to protect yourself from the false ego. Yeah. Because you realize that if it wasn't for my teachers, I would just be using whatever good karma I have to manipulate people. Yeah. And so if people like something I do, I say, by the mercy of my teachers. And that's how I train my yoga students also. That's why we say, because the idea is it's all ultimately coming from God. Any goodness you see in me is, these are from the sacred teachings. You're seeing that and you're seeing it manifest, and I appreciate that. But thank God for my teachers.
Yeah.
That passing on an appreciation, it protects the jiva from falling into illusion. It's a safety cord.
I could use no shortage of those in my life.
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
It's called ducking praise.
So, obviously India was, and I'm sure continues to be, highly impactful in your life and your journey. And I am somehow still one of the few people I know that are on this path that have not made it over there yet.
You got to come on down.
I know. I
do these great pilgrimages every year. I've been doing some 2007. Yeah. And I just take people to my favorite places and I mix it up every year.
Yeah.
Holy people, holy places, holy rivers, holy temples. I tell all the stories.
Yeah.
October 29th is my next one. And it's on my website, raghunath.yoga, RAGHUNATH. Yoga. But then I get to go again in January because I do a 200 I have a team. 200-hour and a 300-hour teacher training. I do a kirtan training for those who want to learn how to lead kirtan or add kirtan to their yoga teaching.
Yeah.
And that's a great month. It's hosted by Radhanath Swami's monks, and Radhanath Swami's there as well at their eco village, 3 hours north of Mumbai. That's a great program. And I've been doing that. This is my 11th year, I think.
That's amazing. All right. Well, I'm noting that mentally because yes, I truly do want to go.
You would fly high, I think, on pilgrimage. I think just experiencing, because there's something magical about watching people experience their bhakti, their love, their attraction, and being in a holy place. Those are stimuluses. Being by the river Ganga, being in a holy temple, hearing from dedicated spiritualists, and hearing these stories and hearing truth on a regular basis. It's very, very powerful, and people have been going to India on pilgrimage for millennia.
Right. Yeah.
But it's always good to go with a pilgrim. I consider myself a pilgrim, so I'm not just selling myself. You got to go with the person who's connected. Or you'll go as a tourist or a backpacker, and you'll have a different experience, because it's all really about the intention you set, and then also how to enter these places, the mood you're in these holy places, the behavior. You know what I mean? It's just sort of like going to a punk show.
Yeah,
you got to understand what's going on, or you won't experience it. You can go by a punk show and say, "Oh, these people are all violent. They're just jumping off the stage and killing each other. It's like a football game."
Yeah.
But if you're into that music scene, you understand, no, it's actually quite different.
Anything but. Absolutely.
It's actually just an expression of their joy in a peculiar way.
Sure is. Peculiar, good word. Well, so I am sure there's no shortage of these experiences, but I'm going to try to live vicariously through you for a minute here, sticking with India. Can you talk about one of the most unexpected lessons you learned while traveling to India, whether it was early on? I remember in your book, you talking about being on that train, very hot, and, that experience. But again, I'm sure there's multiple experiences. Do any come to mind when I ask you that? Unexpected lessons.
I mean, the first thing that you mentioned, being on that train, and just even going to a holy place where, I had to quit my band to do it. And I quit my band at its height. And back then it was traveling to India pre-credit cards. I didn't travel with a credit card. Yeah. Didn't travel with internet or a cell phone, because there were no internet and cell phone. There wasn't even TVs. And the Vrindavan village had one telephone in the entire village, and it didn't work well.
Yeah.
So, and to reserve a place in the ashram, you're writing airmail, waiting for a reply. So it was a little bit, definitely a lot more sketchy and unpredictable. And even that, I broke through. I was free. I felt blissful. I did it. I pulled myself out of the mud, and now I'm in another world, another place, another time, surrounded by like-minded people on a spiritual pursuit. And then all of a sudden you get sick. You get, back then I didn't know how to live in India. I didn't know what to eat, what not to eat, where to eat, what not to eat. I was just sort of feeling myself in the dark. Fortunately, I stumbled upon some wonderful people who helped me discipline, but I was also 22 and I was just, I was celibate for the first time. So I made up for it in stuffing myself with food.
Yeah.
And, I didn't know, anyway, to make a long story short, immediately, even with every good intention and every good inspiration that I had going through me, as soon as I got sick, I was like, what the hell am I doing here? Mm-hmm. I realized what a mental platform I live on and how like your mind can dominate your intelligence and how your mind becomes your master. And it was hard to read that and live there, or it was hard to notice that and live in these holy places. But then you read in the Bhagavad Gita or other wisdom literature that train your mind to be your friend, not your enemy. Mm-hmm. If you don't train the mind, it's going to be sort of like this. It's going to work against you. You're going to end up becoming a slave to the mind. And so you had to train. So the idea of reading sacred literature, reading wisdom literature was to strengthen intelligence. So intelligence dominates the mind. Yeah. Otherwise, the mind becomes the master. And every time there's some sensual experience that you don't like, it's too cold, it's too hot, I stubbed my toe, I got a tummy ache, I got the diarrhea, then your mind will say, yep, it's time to get out of here. It's time to jump ship. It's time to, act out, be offensive, be rude, get in your ego. Who do you think you are? Don't you know who I am? And so it was very beautiful and devastating to get your ego sort of power washed by being in a holy place, reading sacred literature, and realizing how much my mind was dominate my mind, and then endorsing my ego and was dominating my life. And it was beautiful. And I think that's part of our spiritual quest, is to realize I'm not the mind. I'm not the body. I'm not even the intelligence, but I'm going to use this intelligence muscle and imbibe wisdom. And then I'm going to act on that wisdom. I'm going to learn it. I'm going to live it. And then you get to this point where you get realizations from living it. Then you just want to give it away. And that was that next phase of my life where I started a second band in an ashram, which was shelter. It's like, go learn it, live it, and give it. Yeah. And that happens with anybody who gets a higher taste for anything, truthfully, even a material thing. You eat healthy, and you want to tell everybody to eat healthy. You found a new diet that resonates with your body. You want to tell everybody. You pick up jogging or yoga or chess or whatever it is. Sure. And whatever turns you on, you want to turn other people onto it. So, that's sort of what happened.
I appreciate you sharing that. And you're talking about making the mind the friend, sacred texts, mantra, bhakti. Let's say somebody's listening to this conversation and they came into it just because they're a fan of Youth of Today or even Shelter, but haven't really had an interest of diving deeper into the path. I know we all have our own unique journeys, but somebody listening right now, what is a sacred text? Okay, the Gita, we've talked about that. There's so many translations. I want to step onto the path and taste what you guys are talking about. Sure. What do you recommend I do? What would you say to that person?
Well, if you're saying the person was a fan of me, or they listened to this interview and said, I don't know who this guy is, but I'm interested, read my book. Because the whole thing is my story peppered with my realizations, and so much feedback I get from it, either like through emails or through people writing on Amazon, reviews, is, oh, that really resonated with me. I totally understand where you're at because I'm there right now. So I think a lot of times people's personal stories, if you hear Ram Dass's story, if you hear Radhanath Swami's story, they resonate with people because we're all, the type of people who read these books are oftentimes on a spiritual quest themselves. So if you like what I'm saying and it resonates with you, read the book. And if you like that book, read Radhanath Swami's book, read Be Here Now, read the Bhagavad Gita. Sure. And I think progressively like that. Some people, to read the Bhagavad Gita, it's too heady for them, or they're not philosophically inclined. So, someone like Radha Swami's book is same thing. He's on a journey. He hitchhikes to India in 1971, and he gets to the border, can't get in. The guy finally lets him in. He lives in the Himalayas with these sadhus, and the whole thing is peppered with spirituality and his spiritual realizations coming from like a Jewish kid in, suburbs of Chicago. Mine's from a punk kid in the Lower East Side of New York. So these are all, but the ideas are the same. The path we're walking is very similar. It's just, I would read, for me, I would read those books. Another great book is the classic of ancient India, the Mahabharata. Maha, Bharata, which is what Indians consider the history of ancient India. And it deals with warriors, mystics, yogis, noble kings, evil kings, archetypes of evil and licentiousness and archetypes of chivalry and beauty. And the version I really love is condensed from the original Mahabharata, which is the biggest epic ever written. But a great one I found is the author's name is Krishna Dharma, and you can get that on Audible too. And it's one of these things that my kids love this book. My kids, when they were little, as soon as we get in the car, they'd be like, "Put on the Mahabharata so we can listen to it." It's cool. Gripping, and it gives you the history of ancient India and the ethics and the morality of ancient India. And so that's a great book, and it's a great entrance. And of course, the Bhagavad Gita is a thin chapter of the Mahabharata. So you'll understand the Gita in context. Otherwise, the Gita reads just sort of as a philosophical book.
So I guess as we're getting to a close, the book's been out for a little while now. I know you've been on plenty of shows talking about it. You just did the tour in Europe and got to talk about it over there as well. Is there anything that you have not gotten to talk about in the book in these conversations that you'd wish somebody had asked you? Anything, any part of it that you wish you could talk about more? And I don't know.
I don't know if there's any one thing. I will say we do our own podcast, Wisdom of the Sages. The idea is that if you hear or read a good book, say, or I come and teach a yoga class and I explain philosophical background of yoga and bhakti, people might go, "Yeah, that's really cool. I like that." And walk away smiling. It's not enough. It's not enough to change us. For example, if I get a gym membership and I go to the gym once a week, it's not enough to change me. To really change my body, going to the gym, I got to show up on a regular basis. So we created a podcast that we can hear wisdom literature on a regular basis. And it's exactly what you're doing too. You bring these very important topics and you talk about them on a regular basis. And that's how the yogi, this is not me talking, but this is how the yogis say, this is how you change your thought process. This is how you change your choices. And it's by changing your choices, we change ourselves. This is the idea of our podcast, Wisdom of the Sages. Can we hear wisdom literature on a regular basis, discuss it, take questions and answers, and make it entertaining and lighthearted, and also very deep too. So that's one thing I wanted to say is it's important to dive into this stuff and develop the mind. One of the qualities of the mind is it gets addicted to things. And we can get addicted to things that dismantle our life, or we can get addicted to things that enhance and elevate and springboard our life to higher realms. So we say, get addicted to things that lift us higher, and it'll radically change us.
I love that. Well, so as we come to a close, I appreciate you sharing about that, and I know that podcast is available everywhere people get their podcasts. Anything else you want to leave our listeners with? Again, I know your website will be linked down at the bottom. It's raghunath.yoga, correct? That's your
thanks.
Yeah,
check out the book. If you like the book, write a review. On Amazon, I read everything that people write. And and when I go on a trip to India, we have these wonderful trips. It's my favorite thing I do all year is going. And since I've been going there since I was a young man, it's just my pleasure there to take people and have a experience. Of course, we don't do it like I did it. I slept on the floor and we were living in ashrams. There's a little bit more cushy. But at the same time, I think the experience is the same. And me and my assistants, we just do lots of kirtan in holy places, and it's quite wonderful.
I mean, it sounds quite lovely.
I'm looking forward for you coming one day, Chris.
Yeah, I really appreciate you planting that seed. I am honestly going to look at the dates, see what my October looks like, and see what my bank account looks like. And it's long overdue. So, and what better person to go with than you? So,
thanks. I'll be looking forward to. I love when there's a person I really like, and they want to come, then I get excited about it too. It's about taking them and showing them my favorite places.
Yeah. Love that.
Thanks so much. I'm also going to be at the Berkshire Yoga Festival this year.
Oh, sweet. So a friend of mine just was telling me she's going to that from California. I will not be there, but
okay.
When is that happening?
It's
May, right?
In June, first week of June.
Okay.
Which is, I think it's the second weekend of June.
Okay. And then the Youth of Today shows are those June as well?
Third week of July. I think I got to check that.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. All right, my friend. Thank you so much. Keep up the good work.
Appreciate you. You as well. Take good care.
Okay, brother. Bye-bye. Bye.